I think we can all agree that Danmachi, or Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, isn't the most spectacular example of a groundbreaking anime. I've personally seen stories that I'm more interested in. Take Dororo, for example. I've seen better animation flow, even in this season alone with Vinland Saga and Kimetsu no Yaiba. I could go on, but I think the point is really self-evident. It functions as an all-around average show that is sometimes too prone to falling into classic shonen trappings. But there is one area that I have to begrudgingly give Danmachi props, and it comes from the one field that I never would have expected. Danmachi excels in how well it does game mechanics. Leveling up in Danmachi is quite interesting. Instead of a standard leveling system of something like 1 to 100, it begins at level 1 and works up the ranks towards the upper echelons of level 7. It's not really that interesting on the surface, but in how the ranking up is achieved. In most games, leveling up is achieved through gaining enough experience points, typically through defeating enemies, finishing quests, and the like. That can certainly be said to be true of Danmachi, but it differs in a small but important way. To level up, a character has to achieve two things. To have one of the 5 main attributes, power, endurance, dexterity, agility, or magic, to D rank. That in itself is pretty typical, but it's the other criteria that differs. The adventurer must have accomplished a feat. One of the main ways of achieving a feat is through defeating a notably stronger opponent in battle. That's why someone like Bell levels so quickly compared to other characters. His hero complex is literally responsible for his quick rise. If he didn't fight so recklessly against much stronger opponents, he'd probably still be a low-level adventurer. Most adventurers are shown to be cautious almost to the point of stagnation, playing against the hidden requirements of leveling up. I find it really cool that his personality allows him an exploit in a system created in a way that almost seems intentionally made to keep the majority of adventurers at a low level. It actually leads me into the next point. A heavy emphasis is placed upon ranking up the 5 attributes all adventurers have. In a typical game, grinding high loot areas and elite-type monsters is an aggressive but proven strategy for leveling up quickly. But the added factor of these characters seeing themselves as living mitigates that. None of them want to die, so that style of aggressive play isn't really seen outside of Bell pushing himself to the literal point of collapsing in the dungeons. Not only that, but grinding like that is almost detrimental to in-game play. If defeating much stronger enemies is one of the only available routes for achieving feats, then pushing yourself to the limits of what that level is capable of has a direct impact on the kind of enemy you would have to beat. In Danmachi, we are shown that even some of the weakest level 2 characters are far stronger than the strongest level 1 characters. This makes the problem self-evident. Someone at the pinnacle of level 1 would potentially have to defeat a level 2 enemy to achieve a feat worthy of leveling up, making Ascension much more difficult for the common adventurer. It's this kind of back and forth of meta-level examination of stats as a part of the world that is interesting. People perceive themselves and the world around them through the scope of levels as a part of reality. In games, the type of game or the narrative dictates how stats are integrated, with stats having little to no effect on plot. On the far end, JRPGs like Final Fantasy are stat-laden and heavily tied correlatively to story progression due to the need for constant escalation. Other games, though, such as The Legend of Zelda, which are more player skill dependent, might only include a simple bar for health and magic. But Danmachi makes them a force unto themselves. Stats are at least as important and actually affect how the story can play out, literally warping how the characters view their reality. Instead of the stats acting as just a means to an end to show the growth of the characters, it has a lasting effect on each character and how others view them. This has obvious consequences, such as the fact that a level 5 adventurer is given much more deference than a level 4, while also determining things like how far they are able to travel in the dungeons, or even the need to accomplish feats that are potentially too dangerous for them to conquer, which goes against their human need to live. In games, stats are just a number on screen that determine how hard a character hits and how well they dodge attacks, but these numbers become a second identity to many of these characters. Who they are becomes almost secondary to what they are. This builds directly into the idea of skills. Skills in games are usually determined via class, like in Final Fantasy Tactics, or like in Diablo, through a class tree where the player can decide the character build through implementing complementary skills. Danmachi completely ditches that. Sure, there are your typical species and adventurer types that are boilerplate, like most Amazonesses being domineering and using subjugation and enthrallment type skills. But then you have characters like Bell who don't really fit in any character build. Instead, his personality and actions as an adventurer decided 3 of his 4 main skills, with Firebolt being the one outlier as it was given to him by Seer. For example, Liara's freeze was unlocked through his intense passion for proving himself specifically to Eyes, but also the world as a whole. Argonaut comes from his need to be a hero and save those in need, even if no one else is willing to do what is right. And even Oxslayer is born from the fear and hatred he has for Minotaurs. They act as an extension to his character, showing who he is, or rather what he is becoming, a hero. He continually strives to become a source of hope for others, and in return he is granted powers that can help him on his path toward the future that he is seeking. Danmachi makes me care about stats in a way that no game ever has. By intertwining game mechanics and plots so inextricably, they become almost just another part of one another. It's a type of meta-bending interconnection I wish I could see in video games. How cool would it be if your level had a literal effect in-game when interacting with characters? If grinding wasn't just a means to gaining levels in the shortest time possible, but also had real and lasting consequences on the level of difficulty for advancing. If being cautious affected the speed at which you level up, possibly even making it improbable that you do level up in a real and meaningful way. Hey you. Yeah, you. Thanks for watching my video. It really does mean a lot to me. You know the drill if you liked it, or even if you didn't. Can you think of any other implications this kind of entwining would have on stories and games? Tell me down below. And if you want to up your social skill stats, maybe come talk to me over on my Twitter, link in the description below. Anyways, I'm Gun Kotaku, and I'm off to watch some more anime.